Hello, grade sixes. It is Sunday night and it's been a wonderful Sunday. I hope you were able to get outside and enjoy the good weather today. Uh, it's nothing better than going and getting some sunshine and vitamin D and enjoying. Alrighty, let's get reading. So we left off with the BFG putting or telling about the dream, and the head teacher had been put to sleep. And that is where we left off. He's having quite a good nap there. Surprised there's not snores coming from him. What a funny dream, Sophie said. It's a ring beller, the BFG said. It's a wopsy. Inside the jar, just below the edge of the label, Sophie could see the putting to sleep dream lying peacefully on the bottom, pulsing gently, sea green like the other one, but perhaps a trifle larger. Do you have separate dreams for boys and for girls? Sophie asked. Of course, the BFG said. If I is giving a girl's dream to a boy, even if it was a really wopsy girl's dream, the boy would be waking up and thinking what a rot bungling, grink sludging old dream that was. Boys would, Sophie said. These here are all girls' dreams on this shelf, the BFG said. Can I read a boy's dream? You can, the BFG said, and he lifted her to a higher shelf. The label on the nearest boy's dream jar read as follows. I is making myself a marvelous pair of suction boots, and when I put them on, I is able to walk straight up the kitchen wall and across the ceiling. Well, I is walking upside down on the ceiling when my big sister comes in, and she is starting to yell at me, as she always does, yelling, what on earth is you doing up there walking on the ceiling? And I looks down at her and I smiles and I says, I told you you was driving me up the wall, and now you has done it. Now, something I want to point out to you guys and ladies. So these are dreams, and he has written these. His spelling is quite comical when you look at it, like the word kitchen with a U instead of an E, straight. They're phonetically correct, but obviously spelled differently than you and I would write them. Carrying on. I find that one rather silly, Sophie said. Boys wouldn't, the BFG said, grinning. It's another ring beller. Perhaps you have seen enough now. Let me read another boy's one, Sophie said. The next label said, the telephone rings in our house and my father picks it up and says in his very important telephone voice, Simpkins speaking. Then his face goes white and his voice goes all funny and he says, What? Who? And then he says, Yes, sir, I understand, sir, but surely it is me you is wishing to speak to, sir, not my little son. My father's face is going from white to dark purple, and he is gulping like he has a lobster stuck in his throat. And then at last he is saying, Yes, sir, yes, well, sir, I will get him, sir. And he turns to me and he says in a rather respectful voice, Is you knowin' the President of the United States? And I says, No, but I expect he is hearing about me. And then I is having a long talk on the phone and saying things like, Let me take care of it. Mr. President, you'll bungle it all up if you do it your way. And my father's eyes is googling right out of his head. You see? And that is when I is hearing my father's real voice saying, Get up, you lazy slob, or you will be late for school. Boys are crazy, Sophie said. Let me read this next one. Sophie started reading the next label. I is having a bath, and I is discovering that if I press quite hard on my tummy button, a funny feeling comes over me, and suddenly my legs is not there, nor is my arms. In fact, I has become absolutely invisible all over. I is still there, but no one can see me, not even myself. So my mummy comes in and says, Where is that child? He was in the bath a minute ago, and he can't possibly have washed himself properly. So I says, Here I is. And she says, Where? And I says, Here. And she says, Where? And I says, Here. And she yells, Henry, come up quick. And when my daddy rushes in, I is washing myself, and my daddy sees the soap floating around in the air. But of course he is not seeing me, and he shouts, Where are you, boy? And I say, Here. And he says, Where? And I say, Here. And he says, Where? And I says, Here. And he says, The soap, boy, the soap. It's flying in the air. Then I press my tummy button again, and now I is visible. My daddy is squiffy with excitement, and he says, You is the invisible boy. And I says, Now I is going to have some fun. So when I is out of the bath and I have dried myself, I put on my dressing gown and slippers, and I press my tummy button again to become invisible, and I go down into the town and walk in the streets. Of course, only me is invisible, but not the things I is wearing. So when people is seeing a dressing gown and slippers floating along the street with nobody in it, there is a panic with everybody yelling, A ghost! A ghost! And people is screaming left and right, and big, strong policemen is running for their lives. And best of all, I see Mr. Grummet, my algebra teacher, coming out of a pub, and I float up to him and say, Boo! And he lets out a frightsome howl and dashes back into the pub. And then I is waking up and feeling happy as a whiff squiddler.